Good evening, and thank you for joining me once again for A Voice from the Margins. I am your host, Ajamu Baraka, and I'm here with you again this evening to present my perspective, my comments on what is happening here in the world, in the U.S. And tonight we're going to talk about what's happening with the Green Party. There's just going to be myself this evening. And I'm going to respond to and talk directly with all of you who I know are interested, concerned about what you may have heard that occurred at the Green Party conference. A lot of good things came out of that conference, but of course, like the other parties, we have some major challenges that we're still attempting to deal with. But before we get to that, I wanted to just first comment on one thing that's really important that occurred this week in the news. You know, sometimes we we tend to forget with all of the uh, uh, things that we get involved in, the diversions that we see both of the major parties involved in. That we have these very important issues, and one issue that unfolded this week, a disaster for the Republicans, and in a way, continual disaster for the public, and that is the uncertainty around the health care process just failed. But cooler heads perhaps are prevailing, and there's going to be some movement, I think, on this piece of legislation. But this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. That here we have a situation where this issue of healthcare in this country is an issue that the Green Party should own. This is where we advance along with our allies the very proper and understandable demand for improved Medicare for all. It makes no sense that we have a system in this country in which the best um, uh, that can be offered to the American people are these bills, these healthcare delivery systems in which there are still millions of people who are underinsured and not insured at all. So this is the time for us to advance aggressively an alternative. But we're bogged down in some of the trivial matters around personnel and all kinds of diversions, as opposed to getting to the real business of building a progressive movement that can attack when we have opportunities to advance a progressive legislation. So hopefully we're going to get past all of this and get down to the business of attempting to provide real alternatives for the people. And this healthcare situation is something that has to be addressed. There are millions of people who are now living with uncertainties because they need government support for their health care. Millions of people who don't have health care. Um, and instead of addressing these needs, we have the parties just wasting time with diversionary uh, debates and conversations. And unfortunately, the same kinds of things are now happening within the Green Party. So we got to get down to business. So I'm going to ask. folks that if they have questions regarding what they have heard that is unfolding in the party, any questions they have for me to present those questions. I was in Newark for at least 2 days, um, and I'm prepared to address some of those questions. Let me sort of lay out what I know, what I observed. As all of you know, we had as part of the business of the party, we had an election for the steering committee. The steering committee is the administrative arm of the national committee. This is the committee that basically is supposed to be involved in um, managing the everyday work of the party. There was a process, a voting process that started a few days before the convention, which in which the national committee was going to vote for 4 positions. Two of those positions were individuals who were continuing or were hoping to continue their presence on the steering committee, and then there were 2 slots that were going to be open. Um, and what seemed to have occurred was a pretty ugly campaign emerged. That instead of us having a conversation around what kinds of political perspectives, what kinds of politics people represented, whether or not these individuals who were running for these positions had the skill set necessary to fill those positions, because we know that those positions, because they are administrative positions, we're going to require a significant amount of of, of time. You had to devote and be committed to devoting a significant amount of time. It's hard work serving on a committee like that. Instead of having those kinds of conversations, it appeared that um, in the efforts on the part of some individuals to shape the committee, we had some low-level politics of character assassinations, rumor mongering. We descended to a level that was kind of similar to what we saw with the Democrat Party when you had the election between Keith Ellison and Tom Perez for the head of the DNC. And we saw how silly and ugly that got. And we want to believe and hope that in the Green Party we would not be involved in that kind of silliness. But of course, that didn't happen. And so we had a situation where we had the election. Um, there was an outcome um, that generated a perspective that appeared that there was some racism involved in the voting of the delegates to the national committee, and there was a understandable and legitimate response from folks who were there in Newark. But you know what? That was only part of the story. There's a lot of things that were happening underneath all of that. But where we are now, it appears, is that as a consequence of the action on Saturday night and the discussions on Sunday morning, discussions that were hard because it's very difficult when you have to confront and begin to discuss, issues that in many cases people want to avoid or pretend like certain issues of white supremacy and racism don't exist in the party. But as a consequence of those conversations, we have a situation now where there is a proposal that's being floated in which people are calling for a nullification of the election and a revote to take place. Now, that's a decision that has to be done by the national committee, has to be decided on by the national committee. And of course, there are rules and procedures related to that reflected in the bylaws. But is a very complicated situation because you have folks who, of course, voted um, with integrity, people who believe that their vote should be counted. You have people who believe that there were real issues with the voting process, and you have these other underlying issues related to issues of representation, issues related to ongoing practices inside the party, issues around, to what degree the party really is open for new members, whether or not it's a safe space for people of color. All of these issues came to the surface and are now being debated. So that part of it is really healthy. And I'm hoping that, out of all of this, there's going to be some degree of clarity in terms of a way forward, clarity in terms of serious conversations taking place on the state level where people can and are willing to look at their own practices. Um, so let's see what's going to happen out of all of this. But I'm really somewhat disappointed with some of the activities of some people involved in this process. That has the potential of really undermining the potential of this party. And if this party is unable to realize its potential at this critical historical moment, where people are looking for alternatives, where the Democrats have no credibility, then that's going to be a real disaster, not only for the party, but a real disaster for all who are looking for the possibility of building a real democratic alternative to the two bourgeois parties. So I want to ask some of you out there that are listening to this, what what you think and what are some of your understandings of what's happening, and how do you think we should begin to address some of these issues? So let me see what folks are what I what you all are saying. Kelton asked the question, what do we say to people who say the Green Party is broke and unorganized? What can we do? Well, we say to people that basically these kinds of struggles are struggles that take place in many formations. They are and can be very healthy struggles. That part of our responsibility is to engage in these struggles and go through those struggles with the intent of strengthening the party, of in fact addressing some of those aspects of the party that are in fact not organized very well. There are some painful conversations taking place, and that's not always a bad thing. So we tell people that, and you should tell people that this is part of the growing part of party building, of movement building, and um, let people know that we can't allow these kinds of struggles to demoralize us, because what we are in fact dealing with goes beyond ourselves. And so we tell people that the party has to confront and face its own issues, and that people are in fact doing that. And in the end, it's going to be, I think, a better process, because you know it seems to me that this is these are conversations that probably needed to happen, and it's a good thing that they're happening now. Uh, Jessica asked the question, did they all resign? I guess meaning all of the members of the steering committee. No, all of them didn't resign. Um, a number voiced that they were going to resign on Saturday night, but there's a process for that to take place. And my understanding is that a number of them have now reconsidered and are going to at least be in place until these procedural questions around the election are resolved. So there's still a functioning SC, and we'll see what's going to happen with that once the proposal is debated and decided on. At that point, we'll see just where things stand with the steering committee. But there is a steering committee still in place. There's still a relative order in the party. Let's see. Tatsu as equal outcomes versus equal opportunities. Which do you believe in, Ajamu? Well, that is an interesting question because one has to, um, look at, those words are not what they always seem to mean on the surface. So if there's an assumption that there are equal opportunities, equal outcomes, um, because there are equal procedures, equal conditions, and that equal opportunities exist, well, that's something that has to be looked at and can't be debated. People will argue that there are equal opportunities within uh, this capitalist, racist society that we call the U.S., and that the outcomes are the reflection of non uh, discriminatory processes, that they are just objective processes, and the outcomes in people's lives is just a reflection of what they put into a process. And some people can believe that. Of course, that's a, a core sort of liberal belief that some people hold. It's a classical liberal belief, that is. But I think evidence, lived experiences have demonstrated that basically that's BS. It's an ideological position used to justify inequality. So, those kinds of questions have to be looked at with a critical eye, and go beyond and penetrate the sort of the ideological assumptions that those kinds of questions sometimes will attempt to obscure. Kenny makes a reference to Bruce Dixon's essay on the election in Black Agenda Report. Now, I heard that Bruce came out with a piece today, and I have to apologize. I've been in a board meeting the entire day, so I have not had a chance to look at that article. But I can almost guess what Bruce is probably dealing with. I know he was not happy with what he saw as some cynical use of very real issues that Black people have and people of color have within the Green Party. He was concerned that there were some folks who were involved in manipulating certain things that people unnecessarily attempted to inflame uh, a situation when they knew that the reality of that situation was much different than what it may appear to have been on the surface. So, I'm curious to see what he in fact was talking about in that article. I know that there's a backstory to this, and I think that story is starting to emerge. Let's see. Uh, Paul asked the question: how many from from I guess the community that lost actually campaigned prior to the vote? Well, that's a good question. I really don't know. I mean, there's been different degrees of, I guess, of intensity in terms of people who campaign. Some of the people who talked about their votes said that they voted for people who they knew. Um, I know that the results are basically in the public domain, and one can look at how people voted in terms of how they ranked This was a ranked choice voting process, and that's why the charge that most people voted out of some kind of racial animus just doesn't seem to stand up under closer scrutiny. Um, and so that's why I think it's you know this thing is it has to be looked at very closely and very critically. There's no simple answers to this. I'm not sure why these folks lost, but the one thing that seems clear to me is that there were no intentional forces that were consciously manipulating the processes in terms of the technical aspect of the vote. There were forces that were behind the scenes that were attempting to lower the level of discourse around people who are running. Uh, there was some encouragement to engage in some character assassination, and that part of the story, I think, is going to come out sooner or later. Travis asks, "Can you expound on your comment? Quote: This is some liberal bullshit." This is someone alleged that you said that based on false information that the SC was forced to agree to resign, and you subsequently learned that they voluntarily agreed to resign. My comment was at the end of the meeting on Sunday morning, where it became clear that people were confused about what just occurred, that the discussions that took place that morning and were mere recommendations that had to go to the national committee regarding the role of the FC. Chris Blankenhorn was asking the question whether or not there was in fact an SC, and I commented that of course there was an SC, that this body had no authority to dismiss an SC, and Chris was one of the ones that did not resign, so of course he was on the SC. And I did comment that I thought that there were aspects of what were unfolding that morning that struck me as just some liberal nonsense, because we suspended the agenda that morning. We had some things that had to be dealt with legally for the party. We had people who weren't being honest and serious with their positions and the conversations. We had people who were being liberal because they weren't putting things on the table. And that's what I was referring to, that if you're going to have these conversations, you got to be for real. You got to be principled. You put your stuff out. You debate the issues with integrity and with honesty. We're not going to condemn folks because they honestly felt that they had been harmed, that there was shit in the game, if you will, regarding the election. That was an honest reaction. But what many people didn't know was that there's a story behind even why we had some of the candidates that we had. And so, that story, those stories, are the ones that have to come out so we can see the roles that certain people played in helping to create the crisis that we now are looking at in this party. Cindy says, "I attended the Green Party convention last year. It was such a positive experience. I'm glad I wasn't there this year. The things I'm learning about are very sad and disturbing." Well, that's true. I mean, and but these are the kind of things that happen, and we have to be prepared to deal with those kind of things. For the most part, I mean, up until that moment, I would say that things were relatively positive. We had some good discussions on Friday and on Saturday. There was good feelings, um, but we had a contentious election, and you know, we had reactions to what occurred, and now there's a process of having to struggle through this. Um, but usually these kind of things, as painful as they might be, can also result though in a process that's stronger than before. You can't have phony unity. People always talk about things being divisive, and they're striving for unity. But they really aren't that really serious about that. What they want is to feel comfortable, and so they pretend that things are more unified than they really are, and because they're not authentically unified, then that's why it's so easy for that unity to be broken. When you have real authentic unity, when people have engaged in real principled struggle and have real unity of vision and values, um, then is more difficult to create divisions. So, but that's the process of getting to that level of unity, and many people aren't really prepared to engage in that. You know, this notion that some people who were concerned about and are concerned about issues of white supremacy, for example, in the Green Party, that they are being divisive, then you're missing the boat. You know, those kind of conversations are legitimate conversations. Those kinds of concerns are legitimate. You know, I moved around the country, throughout the campaign and after the campaign, and those are issues people are still grappling with because they are in fact real. And if the party wants to strengthen itself, if it wants to avoid the issues we see, like in the Green Party, in the Democrat Party, then you have to deal with those issues in a forthright and principled way. So that's part of the results that I think are positive. That state parties, locals, local chapters, you need to have these kind of conversations. You need to look around and look at the composition of your local parties, and ask in a very serious way if there's not any representation that reflects the diversity of your own communities. You've got to figure out what is happening there, and deal with that in a very honest way. That's how you strengthen the party. That's how you build an apparatus that's going to be open and ready to absorb large numbers of people who are prepared to give the Green Party a chance. But the Green Party has to be ready also. Omar asked a very political question. Just 'cause the stuff that we don't get a chance to deal with. How do we push back against the federal bill that is targeting BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions? Um, this is a very important issue, and you know, we can't I can't deal with this exactly at this moment because I want to talk about and get back to some of the other stuff too. But this is the contradiction. Here we have people are concerned about the neo-fascism of Donald Trump and the Republicans, and here we have a piece of legislation that is fascist in its core. But we don't see the kind of reaction from the Democrats and even from progressives that one would think we would have with this kind of legislation. So again, it's up to parties like the Green Party to take the courageous positions and push back on this kind of fascist proposal. So I'm hoping that's something that we can in fact take up. Yane says, please note that those of us who were driving this forward were motivated less by the election results and more about the larger issues within the party, issues we trust our fellow Greens desire to address. Please note that those who were in the room Saturday were excited and inspired by the opportunity to address issues within the party that undermine our ability to be what we espouse ourselves to be. People didn't feel attacked, they felt unified. We left feeling ready to be better, and that was and is the point. And Yane is absolutely correct. But that's part of what came out of this process. That even though these conversations are difficult for some, there was the real feeling that there was going to be progress, that the party was going to respond to the issues that were being raised. People felt empowered because they engaged in an action that they felt was righteous, and being one that has turned out and actions like that many times, I understand that, and I think that was a legitimate response. And I'm so glad that Yane is reminding us that it's not just about, it wasn't just about the election, but it was about uh, issues that people in the party have just not dealt with in a forthright and honest way. And the fact that people are discussing for the first time these issues is a good thing. And we have to encourage those conversations to continue, as difficult as they are going to be, because people are still not completely honest with embracing some of their own stuff, you know. But as long as you have people in this party, people of all backgrounds, who are serious about uh, uh, really targeting and defeating all of the elements that keep us truly disorganized and ununified, like the continuation of white supremacy. You know, that is what's going to happen. What has to take place, and that's going to take place because there are people who are committed to that, who understand that unless those elements are confronted and defeated, the party will never be able to realize its potential. So, my friends, these are some difficult days. We have a lot of work still to do. You're going to hear a lot of things about what happened and what is unfolding. I urge you to try to get the facts as we know them. I urge you to be open and honest with yourself, with your colleagues. Don't be shy about discussing what is happening with the Green Party with your friends. Let them know that this is not a bad thing. And the very fact that the party is grappling with these issues, struggling with these issues, is a process that, if handled correctly, will result in a stronger party. But it's going to be a struggle. It's definitely going to be a struggle, because we have um, a party that is still trying to find its way, that is still determining what would be the predominant political orientation of this party, that beneath what sometimes appears to be, you know, um, uh, certain forms of identity politics, there is a real struggle around political tendencies also involved in this process. That's absolutely clear to me. So, my friends, stay tuned. I'm going to let you know, though, that this is probably going to be my last uh, broadcast here on this platform. I'm going to have to make certain changes myself. Um, you stay tuned. When this comes back, this voice from the margin, it's probably going to be on a different platform, on my platform on Facebook. Um, but I'm gonna have to take a break. So stay tuned. Go to my Facebook to get the updates. Um, and understand this: we are in this for the long haul, and that this party is a party that's important um, for politics in this country, and therefore we have to play this thing out and hope that in the end, this will be the instrument that can be used to advance the struggle for peace and justice here in this country. So thank you for joining me again for A Voice from the Margin, and I'll see you down the road. Good night.